Hello, Rush Nation, but also bye. That's right. Terrible joke to start with, but I don't think I'd be happy unless anyone else said it but me. I'm Rob at 5 Yard Rob, and here with me is the Silver Stealer himself, Pittsy. How's it going?
All good, buddy. All good. I like that silver stealer. Normally it's the silver fox, but I'll go with silver stealer. I'll take that.
Yeah, why not? Why not? And completing the team, we have got Lewis as well. Lewis, how fresh are you feeling after a London win and then beating the Bears in 2 consecutive weeks?
I am great. Luckily, the Philly game seems to have been a bit of a blip. And of course, I'm delighted how the season has started. But at the same time, I'm not too surprised. But yeah.
Rolling on that division, especially as your cheesehead rivals are not doing the best at the moment. So now the gang's all here. Let's briefly go into a Thursday night throwback.
And the first Thursday of the bye weeks took us to Soldier Field with a Bears side looking to bounce back after a divisional loss, of course, well, I'm not wearing nothing Vikings, but I'll still pop them anyway. Their opponents were the Washington Commanders with their new name, of course, and a returning Brian Robinson. So the quarterbacks, Justin Fields, who has struggled this year, of course, 190 yards through the air. He threw an interception, but he had an absolute bomb to Dante Pettis. He had a fumble in there, and Washington got to him a few times. 12 carries for 88 yards. It's his best so far this season, showing his dual threat ability, and 19.4 points on the night, which is his best showing of the year. Carson Wentz carrying a bit of an issue with his throwing shoulder, but he done enough to get the job done, I guess. It was very, very ugly. That's 2 Thursday night games on the trot, which has been similar, but 99 passing yards and 2 rushing yards, and it's his worst fantasy football performance on the year with 4.16 points.
Yeah, this game was interesting, shall we say? Okay, we'll go on to the other offensive players. I'll start with Washington. The brightest part of this entire game was just seeing Robinson out there and playing after what happened just before the season started. So to have him back in it's week 6 now. So yeah, that was probably the best part of the whole game, really. He didn't do too bad either. 60 rushing yards with a touchdown. I think the touchdown kind of saved him there as well a little bit. The rest for everyone else was pretty lackluster. Gibson was in there, 35 rushing yards, 3 receptions for 18 yards. McKissick, 2 rushing yards for 20. Also, 3 targets with no catches, which we kind of expect a little bit more from the pass catcher back. I think that's what they've been classes him as. So, yeah. Terry McLaurin, 3 receptions, 41 yards again. Nothing special. Colton at the tight end, 2 for 2 for 23 yards. I think that's about it. There's not really a lot to say. Now for the Bears, Monty, he got 16 carries, 67 yards, 1 reception for 13. Herbert pulled off a great run through the middle and moving down the right. 7 carries for 75 yards, but that one rush up the middle and down the right was for 62 yards. So that kind of took all of those yardage away from the rest of his stats. Pettis, we've said, pulled in a nice touchdown, had 4 for 7, 84 yards, and that touchdown. But that touchdown was also over 40 yards as well, so that kind of takes a lot of that away. And then Mooney, 7 for 12 for 68. Again, this game just didn't have anything really significant to mention. It's just, well, for me, it was a bad game, so we'll move on.
Yeah. I mean, you also got Samuel, who dropped an absolute peach just before, went through his hands, it hit his hand and bounced off. That could have been a great touchdown. And then Herbert getting held at the line as well. So, that was probably the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I've been saying all day, I think this is what happens when you get 2 mediocre defenses coming up against really bad offenses. It kind of skews the numbers. So Washington, 5 sacks, 1 forced fumble on Fields and an interception as well. So if you played them as a DST last night, you end up with 13 points. So a nice start. Chicago, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble. not a whole lot else to talk about. It was a lot of 3 and outs. They dealt with the poor offense as well. And I don't know if you can see in the background over there, I've got Thursday Night Football in the bin. So that's it.
Yeah. So might as well move on to the injury report. I've actually dropped a little bit of a ball here. I was supposed to write down something to recap Thursday night injuries. I don't actually see. Did anyone come off this game? I don't think there was anything. I mean, to be fair, there wasn't that much offense to actually have any injuries from. So, we'll just move on.
And moving on, we shall quarterbacks. So Tua has actually logged limited practices this week, but I've seen that he's been ruled out for week 6 regardless. Teddy Bridgewater, obviously in concussion protocol, but he was limited Thursday. Keep an eye on that one because Skylar Thompson, the rookie, he could get the start anyway. Dak still hadn't practiced as of Wednesday, but he was limited Thursday. I'd expect Cooper Rush to start still. And Jameis Winston looks like he is on the road back to starting for the New Orleans Saints. He was limited Wednesday and Thursday. So Andy Dalton could be in the bin.
I'll add him in there.
Throw him in.
So running backs, not too much of a change here. We obviously have had Rashad Penny's injury in the game last week. Was quite surprised he lasted this long, to be honest, with his injury proneness. But that does pave the way for Ken Walker to come on in. Let's get those wheels up. James Conner also left the game last week, as did Darrell Williams, one of his backups. James Conner with his ribs, Darrell Williams with his knee. James Conner didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, so it could well mean Eno Benjamin, maybe the Arizona RB2 after Kyler Murray runs around as well. Saquon Barkley, he left the Giants game with a shoulder injury in London. He did re-enter the game in the 4th quarter. He has practiced in a limited fashion Wednesday and Thursday, so fingers crossed the Giants get him back for this important game. Damian Harris was limited with a hamstring injury on Wednesday. He is expected to miss time, and we know how much those hamstring injuries can last and just stay with you. So for the foreseeable, I think we could lock in Ramondre here too. Jonathan Taylor, he's been a big miss for the last week or so. He didn't practice Wednesday, but he was limited Thursday and Friday, so we could see him back for the Jaguars, against the Jaguars, I believe.
Yeah, I think the JT, there's words is that he's doing his best to try and get back for week 6. I thought he was going to be out for longer, but we shall see. I'm hoping he doesn't get rushed back for him to then make it even worse and be out for even longer, because that's the worst thing you can do for that type of injury, isn't it? So.
He is a tough cookie though, and like most running backs and that you find they want to get back on the field as soon as possible, but I think he's able. The workload last year, there's no way he wasn't banged up at some point, even if it was, no matter how minor it was.
Yeah.
For me, anyway, especially after the last 2 years in college before that. But yeah.
Sweet. Let's move on to the wide receivers then. We've all seen Keenan Allen has not been featuring since week 1. He's limited in practice on Wednesday, so Goodstein is going to be. I think it's going to be another setback at the end of this week. We shall see what happens with him. T. Higgins did not play basically last week. Recently had a concussion as well. This week it's his ankle. Didn't practice on Wednesday, but he has since returned to the practice field today. So one to watch whether they can get him going or not. Tyreek Hill, his foot is doing all sorts of things. He did not return to Sunday's game in the loss to the Jets. He's limited on Wednesday. Matt McDaniel said that everything is looking good for him. So hopefully they're just being cautious this week. New Orleans Saints, we saw the big touchdown from Olave with a massive hit to his head as well. So he had concussion. Obviously, we've got MT with his foot, and Landry also. All did not practice this week on Wednesday. Olave was limited on Thursday, so we just need to check that injury for his head and see if he comes back. And then 2 more were added quite recently. We've got Tyler Lockett, who was added last night for his hamstring. And Robbie Anderson was just recently, in fact, just about an hour ago, put down as questionable this week too.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett could be a big miss for Gino as well. They seem to have something going on this year. But tight ends, obviously Pat Fryer, Muff, whatever you want to say, he picked up a concussion against the Bills and did not return. Now Zach Gentry, he done okay in his absence, but he was also banged up. I think it was his knee. Pat has been limited Wednesday and Thursday. Gentry didn't practice until Thursday, but it was a full one. So you'll have to keep an eye on that on before Sunday to see which way they're going to be going. Dalton Schultz, I think he might have re-aggravated the previous knee injury because he didn't return to the game against the Rams, and he's been limited Wednesday and Thursday. And just a quick word on Kyle Pitts, obviously with the hamstring injury that kept him out of week 5. He's been limited in practice this week so far.
Oh, I thought I'd gotten a bargain with Schultz on the waiver wire in my leagues. It just turns out he might not be available for this week either. So that's something I'm going to have a look at. Oh, let's move on to our next segment. It is weak points.
Nice. So let's get straight in with them. We have got the weakest against the quarterbacks. This week, number 1 is the Raiders, but they are on a bye, so we don't need to really touch on them. They were averaging 25.5, but we can move on to number 2, which is the Ravens. They were averaging 23.6 points to quarterbacks. This week, they're up against New York Giants, and obviously Daniel Jones proved he could come back in a game against the Green Bay Packers, so it could be a nice weapon this week. Hopefully that form can continue, but obviously we need the running back to be within 2 to make that work. Lions on the third day are 22.9 on average, but they're also on a bye.
Yeah, it seems like the teams on bye haven't been doing very well against the skill position players, but weakest against running backs, this is one. The Chargers, they're letting up 28.9 points on average, and they're facing the Broncos. Obviously, Javonte Williams is out for the season. So Melvin Gordon seems to be the guy there. Obviously, Mike Boone, he was half relevant maybe last week. And you got Latavius Murray there, who scored a touchdown in London. The Texans, they're on a bye. They was letting up 27.6 points. And then we got the Browns, 26.9 points, taking on the Patriots. Damian Harris, obviously likely out. Ramondre Stevenson, 161 yards last week. He looks good for this one.
Weakest against wide receivers. Sadly for you, Mr. Pitts, it is the Steelers with 41.5 points.
Bad.
And they are up against the Buccaneers, who, as we know, have got a good selection of wide receivers to choose from. Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, Scotty Miller as well. But for me, Chris Godwin stands out just because they're likely going to put coverage on Evans, and Godwin is the next man up. So yeah, it could be any of those wide receivers, but Godwin is my choice for these ones.
Yeah, and Fitzpatrick is also banged up this week as well, so one of the best in the back could be an issue as well. That's not good.
Second on the list, and this completes the bye week teams, the Tennessee Titans. They are on 37.6 points. Like I said, they're on the bye. Third team is the Ravens, 36.4 points on average. And as we've already said, they are at the Giants. Darius Slayton, for me, stood out against the Packers after having virtually no involvement up until that game. He's seemed to have taken a step forward in that group. So he's my first shout. And then David Sills and Richie James, they round out that group. Whether or not they have got the talent to do it against the Ravens, we shall see.
Right, so weakest against tight ends. Seahawks are at the top of the list. They are averaging 23.6 against the tight end. This week they're up against the Cardinals. So you've got Ertz and McBride that have potentially a good shot here. The Cardinals are up next, slightly less. They're down at 15.9, so that's quite a difference between the Seahawks. They're up against the Seahawks, as we just said. So again, be an interesting one, that one. Fan has been a little bit underwhelming, but Big Will Disley has been touchdown dependent. So it'll be interesting to see how they can manage to get that in. And then we've spoken about the Raiders, 15.1, they're on the bye.
Cool. So we move on to our final segment, and that is the flex of the week.
Right, covering. So we talked about Las Vegas, Detroit, Tennessee, Houston, all on the bye this week. So it's trying to find some place to kind of fit in amongst all that. I was so tempted to go with Ramondre Stevenson again as a double down on the last week of this week, but I felt probably need to go somewhere different. So I'm sort of doubling down anyway. I'm slightly old school, as I'm going to go for a flex that I made in 2 seasons ago on the Fast Action Pod before the video came out. It is slightly a risk. He is questionable all week, but if he is good to go, Jacoby Myers is my pick. Last game last week with the rookie, he had 8 targets, 7 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown, so that was pretty nice. Game before, when he was playing again, he played against the Steelers, 13 targets, 9 receptions and 95 yards. So if he suits up this week, he's their go-to guy in New England, and he's working well in this offense. And they go up against the Browns, who have been letting in all sorts of yardage. So this could be a nice week again if he is ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could have got away with Stevenson after 161 yards last week. But
yeah,
I think this is the first tight end we've picked out for Flex of the Week this season. And I know it's my most rostered player over all the however many leagues I'm in. Evan Engram. Now, the Colts are very good against wide receivers. Joint least fantasy points allowed versus the position. Christian Kirk, he had an off week last week, week 5. Wasn't very good week 4 either. But Engram is Trev's safety blanket when he can't get things popping. Consistently over 70% of the snaps each week. And against Indianapolis in week 2, he had 8 targets. He caught 7 of them. Only 46 yards, though. Houston last week, 10 targets, caught 6 of them for 69 yards. Obviously, with tight ends, it's all about finding that touchdown upside, which he hasn't yet provided us with. So he should have the volume, which could transpire to a touchdown. And the Colts are also letting up 13.5 points to tight ends on average, the 5th most in the league. So, yeah, my boy Evan Engram.
nice. Now, my flex of the week is down on the sheet as Eno Benjamin. But as we know, several surprises can appear in games, and I'm going to drop a surprise in right now. My flex of the week is Taysom Hill.
He's not a tight end.
So Engram is still the first tight end picked at this in this flex of the week. Yeah, Taysom Hill seems to be a player that no defense can deal with. So he can pass it, he can run it, he can catch the ball, he can recover fumbles. He is the utility man. Nathan from our chat knows this very well. He propped him so hard on the chat last week. And I think he can do it again. It doesn't matter how much prepping you do for Taysom Hill, he just seems to find a way. We've already talked about all those wide receivers who are going to be missing from this lineup. You know, we've had Thomas not practicing, Olave could be out, Landry's not practicing. They're going to have to put the ball somewhere. And with Kamara back as well, I think Taysom Hill is going to be the perfect complement piece across the board. There have been people who've been waking up to this as well and putting him in the flex. So I think anyone who is here and listening right now, put him in the flex as well.
Yeah, with Taysom Hill, he's like the tight end 3 or 4 or something like that on the year, and he's caught 1 pass, like for 2 yards or something like that. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But Eno Benjamin, who you was originally going to go with as well, obviously James Conner's looking to miss time. Darrell Williams, he got well, I think Benjamin was in front of Williams anyway, so I love that shout as well.
Did they sign? Was it Corey Clement? Is that? Did they sign this week as well? Did I see that? I'm sorry, they've signed someone of the Cardinals anyway. So
I think that's just another body for
just
Kyler not to use. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that is about it for this week. Anyway,
Nice. Yeah, I enjoyed this one. There's a few things, especially when you've got bye weeks to throw into the mix as well. It definitely makes waivers a lot more interesting and trying to work out those little tweaks that you need. So, especially with all these injuries at the moment, the injuries seem to be just non-stop at the moment. It's crazy.
They are racking up.
Definitely.
And there's no London game this week. Is that correct? So
yeah, I
it's the
believe
30th, I think.
yeah, week 8. I believe the next one is. Yeah.
Rob, you should know this. We're going, mate.
we are indeed. I just want the American viewers and the listeners to not have to worry about setting lineups at a ridiculous time.
Ridiculous time in the morning. Yeah. That's cool. All right, boys. Well, for today. And anyway, you guys out there, see you next week for week 7 for more Fast Action Friday. Until then, keep rushing.